Okay, Tom Molnar is the one who got me in contact with Dan Maurer. And it was interesting because spur of the moment, and because he has a message too, he came. He is, as I put in the newspaper, was an addict and then was arrested and then an author. What he commented in the paper was that what you said, that being arrested was the best thing that happened to you.
Absolutely.
So, he has written this book. Okay. You may hold it, show and tell, you guys. Okay. And it's called a graphic drawing style novel. Now, research shows that our brains work differently. They work better if you have a picture and the words. Okay. But then I was going to call it a graphic novel, but then I thought everyone would think it was sex and porn, and we probably wouldn't have enough room here to... So, my next thought was, oh my gosh, this guy's name is Maurer. Could he be related to the baseball player, Joe Mauer? So I emailed him. And quick, he emailed back. He said he gets asked that a lot. And yes, his brother is Joe Maurer. And I'll let you explain the rest.
Yes, it grabs everybody's attention at first. Yeah, my brother is Joe Maurer. I live in St. Paul. My Joe Maurer is an organic dairy farmer, and he lives in Eau Claire. But his name is Joe Maurer, so when people ask me, I'm not lying, and I say, are you related? Yes, I am. That's great. So thank you, Rosie, right? Got that correct? All right. It is awesome to be here today. And I have come through and seen Cannon Falls along the side of the road, but I've never driven into the town. And I just have to tell you, what a delightful, neat community. It's just really beautiful. And considering also that you have this great program that you do with TRIAD, I just really have to say I'm duly impressed. It means that law enforcement and the citizens here of this town and also of the county, or is it just kind of of this town? Is everybody?
Area.
Oh, the area, right. That's really, really impressive because it means it's not us and them, it's we. We're working together. So I'm happy to be here today. Yes, my name is Dan Maurer, and that's an extra R in there, but you don't have to put that in there for the spelling if you don't want to. I am a person of long-term recovery. What that means for me is I haven't had any alcohol or drugs for just a little over 4 years now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you my story, which is a humdinger. And it's the story of my falling in life and then getting back up. And today, now I'm a freelance writer. And I enjoy that very much. I enjoy expressing in words and sharing with people in a story, in a narrative. And the reason why I like doing that is it immediately captures people's attentions. Because human beings are storied people. You know what that means? It means from the very beginning, back when human beings sat around a campfire in a cave, the way that we understood our reality is by telling stories. That's what we do. It immediately captures our attention. Now, let's have a little bit of fun with this right now. Since I am a writer, I'll just ask you, if you're watching a TV program, or you're going to a good movie, or you're reading a good book, what to you makes a good story? What different components does it have to have?
Substance.
What's that?
Substance.
Substance. What does that mean?
It means something that's full. I mean, that gives you a
Okay.
story. I mean,
Okay, so giving the story, that has to have a plot then, that's what you're saying. Another way of saying it. Right, it has to have a plot. It has to have the different, if you're talking about the substance here, it has to have the different people. What are those different people within a story? What are they called? What's the umbrella term? The characters, right. It has to have characters. It has to have characters that have depth. They can't be cardboard cutouts, right? Okay, and that means that we learn a little bit about their lives. What else has to happen within a story to make it a good story? A good one.
A good setting.
A setting, right. Cannon Falls, Minnesota. It's a setting. Or the moon, or anywhere that you can dream of. I mean, it can even be in fantasy and science fiction. It can be Narnia or Middle Earth. Right, so you have to have those things. And I always say that there has to be one more thing that a good story has Let's just, this is sort of, I guess, what I'm thinking. And I hate teaching this way, but we just have to do it anyway. What is the one more thing that the story needs to have? What's that?
Something,
Well, we already talked about plot.
Something that grabs your attention right away.
And why does it grab your attention?
Because it makes your mind work to get into that story. You're in there.
Right, exactly. So it asks questions, doesn't it? It allows a mystery to be there. I'm not just talking about mystery stories or mystery writings. I'm talking about it grabs your attention because you want to know what happens next. Okay? And what I'm going to be talking about today is my life, a part of my life, not to the gory details too much down there, but I'm going to be sharing my story in a way because I was at a certain point in life about 5 years ago where I thought my story was finished. I thought it was over. Now, I know a little something about stories because my dad and my grandpa are awesome storytellers. I grew up in Anoka, Minnesota, which is just north of the Twin Cities, and back when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, it really wasn't a suburb. It was more of a third-ring bedroom community is what you call it. Now, of course, now you go north of the cities, it's suburban almost all the way to St. Cloud, it seems like. But when I was growing up there, it was a small town. It was a good place to live. I had good parents. My father, Donald Maurer, this is my claim to fame too, he's the inventor of the portable TENS unit. Does anyone know what that is? That's great. Yeah, all right, all right. The little pads that you put on your skin, and they use it for pain reduction. It's a non-drug way to have pain reduction. It sends the electricity through there. And also, if you do it just right, it twitches your muscles like this. And I remember as a kid, when he was testing it at home, he put it on our dock suits, and he'd go like that and just turn it up a little bit, and their tail would go like that. It was goofy. So my grandpa and my dad were great storytellers, and of course, setting was important then. We'd go up to our lake cabin. It's Minnesota. We got to talk about a lake, right? So we went up to the lake and in the summertime, and I remember sitting around the campfire with my brother, Joe Maurer, and my cousins, and my grandfather and my dad would tell stories. And they loved to tell stories, and I think part of it is they loved to leave us at cliffhangers. So they would get to a certain point and they would say, all right, we'll tell the rest of it tomorrow. And I think the real reason that they did that was to annoy my mother, because we would stay up after they would tell us the story because we tried to figure out what would happen. He told some great ones too, and they were always weird. Now that I look back at them, they're bizarre in some ways. He used to talk about, one story that he had was a guy named Klaus who was in Interpol, and he had these little dachshunds, once again the dachshunds, that had these utility collars, police utility collars, and they'd bend their head down like this, and a poison dart would come out. And you know, the kids, we just loved hearing those stories. And when he would tell these, of course, he would, like I said, get to a cliffhanger, literally sometimes. Klaus was, the Interpol officer was hanging on the side of a cliff, and the bad guy was coming with his machine gun decked vehicle, and it was blazing away, and the dogs were running, and maybe one was wounded and going like this. And he'd say, all right, I'll tell you the rest of it tomorrow. And we would want to know the rest of the story. And of course, eventually he would tell us what would happen. And sometimes it was a bit of a letdown, but we knew the rest of the story. It was never finished. Now, life isn't necessarily like a story, because stories don't tell you all the details. You know, we don't go into a movie and say, okay, now he had to go to the bathroom, so now we're just going to wait out here like that. By the way, that bathroom is about 120 degrees. Yeah. It's just crazy. Two things I'll remember when I came to Cannon Falls. You have a pheasant problem, and your bathrooms are hot. And you have delightful people, number 3. Yeah. Yeah, so anyway, I grew up in Anoka, Minnesota, and I had good parents. And my gateway drug, we've all heard of that before, right? Gateway drug. My gateway drug was alcohol. And I wasn't really a big drinker, but I wanted to know what it felt like to be drunk. So I remember one time, I was 16 years old. My parents, I think either they were out of town or were upstairs sleeping. And I said, okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to go up to my mom's liquor cabinet, open it up. What should I get? Well, she has a brandy every once in a while. I'll try that. Glug, 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 glug. Threw in a little bit of ice and said, oh, here it goes. Oh, God, this is terrible. I just forced it down. And as a 16-year-old, you know, not very big guy who had barely hit his growth spurt, pretty soon the room was spinning. It was awful. I was throwing up in the toilet. And most normal people, when that happens, they go, oh, man, I don't want to do that again. That was terrible. But people who have the brain of somebody who is at least attracted towards drugs and alcohol, the question that I said to myself was, well, that was interesting. Let's try that again. I'll just be more careful this next time. And so I just experimented here and there, but it was nothing really big. Of course, many of us in, especially a more rural community, we might say, well, that's pretty common. You know, kids do that. They experiment with different things, so on and so forth. I certainly didn't consider myself what we in the rooms call an addict or an alcoholic. I went to Concordia College in Moorhead, Minnesota. It's nice and flat there, not like your beautiful country that you have around here. And I was a high achiever. I was a German, mathematics, and economics triple major. And I had always had kind of an aptitude for learning in school and kind of an intellectual guy. And I enjoyed it a lot. There I met who would become my wife, Carol. And she was from eastern Montana, which I thought was this exotic locale, and wanted to know what it was about. I wanted to know so much what it was about that I ended up moving there right after graduation. Now, here's a guy who graduated magna cum laude at Concordia College from Moorhead with a triple major, and I was a customer service rep at a small town bank. But I was excited to be there, genuinely. We had just gotten married, relatively speaking, got married kind of young, 22 years old, right out of college. And I was happy where we lived. It was in Sidney, Montana, which is actually sort of the west end of the Bakken Formation. That will come into play later on. And I was there for a year and a half, and I worked in this bank, and we were happy. We lived on a little place called Sunflower Lane, got my first dog, a German short-haired pointer. I enjoyed hunting out in the prairie, and we had a really good time. But I really wanted to do something else in life, so I ended up going to graduate school in Dubuque, Iowa. And it was there, and this is the part of the story where it shifts a little bit, it was there in that place in Dubuque, Iowa, where I had something bad happen. I suppose it would be called a plot twist. I had a lot of pain in my gut, and we didn't know what was going on. And I went to the doctor, and they did a colonoscopy, and they said, Mr. Maurer, you have ulcerative colitis. Now, ulcerative colitis is where your colon, the mucosal layer inside your colon decides basically to attack itself. It's an autoimmune disease. And I was like, oh, great, what do I got to do now? So he gave me some medication to help with the inflammation directly there. But the attacks kept happening. And while I was in graduate school, my wife once, she took me to an emergency room because the pain was so bad. And the emergency room doctor, I don't know if he was ignorant of ulcerative colitis and as far as what control that I needed for my pain. But when I came in, he asked me, he said, Mr. Maurer, what's your pain level at? Oh, I don't know, I suppose a 6 out of 10. Oh, okay, well, here, I'll write a prescription for you here, and you need to go to the doctor afterwards. And he wrote me a script for 30 Demerol with 3 refills. Now, that's a lot of pain control. Demerol is probably one step below, and it's of heroin as far as a synthetic painkiller. And you know, it was great. That evening I had no pain. I slept fine. It was nice. And most people listen to their doctor and they say, okay, take as much of this as you need, but if you don't need any more, quit. But something clicked up in my brain that said, aha, I remember that experience with brandy back at 16, and I drank a little bit since then. This is way different, and this is what I want. There is a center in our brain which is located in the nucleus accumbens, and that is where the pleasure center is activated. Now, with most people, we have that there to tell us, good things are happening. You should keep doing this. And when good things happen in life, you know, the birth of your child, you get an award at school, you get married. Well, I don't, that could be a good or a bad thing, but it was good for me anyway. You know, all these things that happen in life, it's there because I believe there's a creator that made us that said, you know, this is a nice thing that's going on. Now, in a person who is an alcoholic or an addict, or one who can change to that, it's a little bit different. To show you what this means, I'll just give an example. If I had a power like Iron Man, you know how Iron Man in the movies, he has that thing that goes blast like that? And I held up my hand, and instead of it going blast and all of you would blow out of the room, in which case I think your sheriff might have something to say about that. But instead, I went pow like that. It went directly to the center of your brain, to your nucleus accumbens, and made you feel really, really, really good, as if you were high on drugs. 50% of you would go, oh my God, that was scary, look what he did. The other 50% would say, wow, that felt really good. I wonder what happened. What did he do? Of those other 50%, there's about 10% of those, so 5% total, that would say, that was really cool. I got to see what that guy is going to do again. And of that, of those, say, 5% of those people, about 0.5% will do anything they possibly can to get to feel that feeling again. And they'll want to come up and they'll probably want to cut my hand off so they can have it themselves. Okay? And that's, at least statistically, what we know about addiction within the general public. And it affects every demographic that we can think of. It doesn't matter what race you are. Different people have different genetic propensities to go towards particular drugs. Some want to go towards alcohol, and others want to go towards opiates. Others want to go towards amphetamine, speed, cocaine. And for me, my experience that I had in Dubuque, and this is the part of the story that I tell you, is that I wanted to have opiates. That was the thing that I want. So it was this experience at graduate school where up in my mind it was cemented that this is what I wanted to have. Right after I had that experience, well, not right after, but I finished my education that I was doing in Dubuque, Iowa, and I ended up getting my first-time job in all places. I think you mentioned it, North Dakota, just north of Bismarck, North Dakota. And it's funny, you talk about the meat people. I think I know who you're talking about, too. He's been up there, too, and his meat was just as bad. So, you know, my first job, I liked it. I was very good at what I did. And it was in a small town, and my wife got a job in a grain elevator, and we were pretty happy. Underwood, North Dakota was the place of birth of my two sons, Joshua and Nathan, and now they're 14 and 10. We now live in St. Paul, which has been good. But back then, we really enjoyed living there. This is before the oil boom and all that stuff happened. And north of Bismarck, they do, however, have a gigantic coal mine. And most of Minnesota, north of the Twin Cities, just around that St. Cloud area, Anoka County, Stearns County, they get all of their power from the place where I was living, which is Underwood, North Dakota, Coal Creek Station, and Falkirk Mine. It's a lignite coal mine that they have there, and they produce the electricity, and Minnesota is the biggest customer that they have for that. It was great. I mean, most people think, oh my God, you want to move to North Dakota? Ugh, this is terrible. But I really enjoyed living there. One reason is I enjoyed hunting so much. I'm a big aficionado of getting out in the field, and I had dogs, so I enjoyed doing that quite a bit. And I managed to function, and but there was always something up in my head that said, you know, you need to kind of have a little fun every once in a while. And my colitis was pretty much managed, so at that point, I faked it. And there was a lot of doctors out in the prairie there where I could go to different doctors and I could just get a little bit of medication. And what I thought up in my head was, this is okay because this is compartmentalized. This isn't going to affect my life. I can place it right over here. And whenever I would run out of the pills, I would end up gravitating towards alcohol. And I began to drink more during the daytime too. I had a job, like I said, I was very good at. But it had a lot of flexibility to it. And that meant after I got my work done, I could drink, or I preferably would take pills, but those didn't always last very long. As I began to drink more alcohol, even though I didn't gravitate towards that, it was something that I used. And eventually I became addicted, and I didn't really realize what was happening. And there's so many things that I did within that time, especially when I was drinking, that I'm very ashamed of. But I no longer have shame for. Let me explain what I'm talking about. There's two things, guilt and shame. Have you ever heard the difference between those two things? Guilt is something that you feel bad about, and you may even want to correct. Shame is not the thing, but you. And at least at that time, I felt like there was something wrong with me. Now, I no longer feel that, but that's the way I functioned most weeks at that time. Eventually, ended up getting another job. It was at in a bigger place, and that was in the oil boom, and it was kind of in the area where we had lived before in my former life. And that was Williston, North Dakota, which is what everybody hears about right now with the oil boom. And I enjoyed living there too, but I didn't like what I did for a job anymore. And part of that was just the amount of drinking that I had done and the amount of pills that I was taking. And drinking no longer worked, began to get really shaky and a ton of anxiety. And if you can tell already, I'm a pretty tightly wound person to begin with. I have a lot of anxiety. But it made it even worse that I was drinking so much. And then one day, I finally said, I have to deal with my anxiety in a different way. And so I went to the doctor again. And for me, any solution that I'm going to have is a chemical solution. So I said, Doc, what can you give me? I'm anxious, I get these panic attacks, and I need to function. And he prescribed for me some benzodiazepines, which is like Valium, Xanax, and lorazepam. And those weren't something that I really wanted to have, but they made me really chilled out. And I found that if I drank on them, that I felt pretty good. There's one problem that happens. When you drink on them, you get a major blackout. Now, I'm not talking about passing out. Blacking out is, I could be talking to you right now, and you may or may not know that I'm under the influence of something, but I will have no memory of it. It's called Anterograde Amnesia. And it's a pretty scary thing because you don't know the stuff that you did. Usually people who are drunk and blackout, you can really tell because they're so drunk that they're stumbling all over the place. With benzos, you can take 1 or 2 doses of benzodiazepines, and if you drink a little bit on it, especially too, you get these major blackouts. And all sorts of scary things happen. I remember we went down once with my family, with my 2 boys, and visited my their grandparents. My parents, they lived down in Sanibel, Florida. And I had a bunch of clonazepam with me, and I took it that entire week. And I tell you this in complete truth, I don't recall anything of that week other than very gray moments where I was fighting with my dad and talking to my wife and trying to defend myself. But I don't know what I said, and I don't know what I did. I was blacked out for a whole week. We got back from that trip, and my wife said, I want you to go to treatment. And she was very scared because she was scared for me, but she wanted also to have a relationship with me, and the man that she married wasn't there anymore. And I said, okay. So, but I didn't want anybody to know that, you know, I had this terrible thing, this addiction. So I said, well, what can I do? Well, I have ulcerative colitis. I know, I'll go to Mayo Clinic. And I looked up on the internet to see if whether or not they had a treatment program, and voila, they did. So I said, and anybody asked me, they said, well, what's going on? Well, I have some health issues, I'm going to Mayo Clinic, which was true. And so I said, I was down there for 2 weeks. I decided that the program really wasn't for me, and I didn't want to do it. By the way, it was fantastic. They have a very good program there. But got done early, and my wife is just shaking her head going, oh, what's going on here? And I said, it's okay, it's okay. I got it under control now. I can really try to do this myself. And I really thought, yeah, you know, I'll just kind of do this myself. All these AA meetings and stuff I don't need. They seem too cultish for me. I don't want to do that. Well, things got worse. I mean, they always do with anybody with an addiction. I began to drink more, began to have stomach problems, so much that there was blood up this way and blood down that way. It was nasty, and it became very painful. And the second time I went to treatment, it was in Williston, and of course, by that time, everybody knew. But I really wanted it. I wanted it really bad. This was 6 years ago. And went into the program, finished the 30 days, started to go to meetings, thought everything was all right. And then just this little idea came up in my head that once a night I could have a beer out in the garage. Well, it's so strange how it advances and changes. That one beer that you have in a garage, pretty soon it's a couple beers, and it's 3, and then it's added with vodka, and then it's something else. By that time, too, it was really difficult to get painkillers. I'd even tried on the internet to get this thing called tramadol, which is a synthetic opiate. It isn't very strong, but if you take an overdose of it, what it does gives you like a nice Vicodin-like buzz. The problem with that, it affects the serotonin receptors in your brain, and you get this thing called Serotonin Syndrome, which means you have a grand mal seizure. I had 7 of those seizures at one time, one of which my kids saw. And today, that's the biggest thing that I work to get out of shame in my life. I don't know how many times that I drove picking up my kids. I was sure I was over the limit. It was really bad. This is the second time after I've been to treatment. I managed to get another supply of benzodiazepines, and then everything just started to merge and get all together, and I went off the rails. And what I mean by that is I completely blacked out. And something happened. I didn't know what it was. But they told me afterwards, and it was the Williams County Sheriff's Department that told me this, that I had decided that it would be a good idea to walk into other people's homes and look for pills. Now, especially in Williston, North Dakota in general, there's a lot of ranch houses out there, and none of the guys keep their doors locked, and I knew that from my job that they wouldn't do this, but I don't think that I would have ever decided to do that had I not blacked out. But in that case, that's what I did, and I guess I did it a couple times. My wife went to Florida with my kids again to visit my folks. I was supposed to meet them down there after Christmas. I never did that because I got so drunk and didn't know what was going on. And once I ran out of liquor, I decided I wanted to go to the liquor store and drove my pickup truck, and I was completely unable to drive. And went to the liquor store, and I remember pulling out, and I like smashed somebody's mirror or something, and I just didn't think of it. I started driving home, and then my pickup ran off and went into a ditch. And behind me were 3 sheriff's deputies in 3 different squad cars. And this is kind of funny, and I just have to mention this. I was so drunk that I thought, oh, well, they're here to help me pull me out. So I said, hey guys, I got a chain in the back if you want to do that. And they're like, no, Dan, we're not here to pull you out of the ditch. And then they hauled me to jail, and I had a DUI. And that wasn't so bad because most of it I slept off. But I kept doing this behavior of where I was walking into people's houses. And eventually I was arrested for felony trespass. They figured that I was doing some felonious activity while I was there, and evidently I must have. And all of this happened while in my job, I was a Lutheran pastor. And I say that not to shock you, but to strike it home all the more that this illness, now I don't call it a disease, I call it an induced mental illness, because that's really what it is. Dan's brain, add alcohol and drugs, I go crazy. Okay? All of this happened while I was a Lutheran minister. Well, obviously, after I got arrested, I wasn't an ELCA pastor anymore. I wondered if my wife was going to leave me. Here I was, I lived in Germany for 2 years. I fluently speak German and a little bit of Russian. I could translate Koine Greek. It's even on my arms. And I could read Hebrew. I was a good minister. I was a good pastor. I cared about people. I was a good speaker. I cared about kids. I thought that I was one of the good guys. And here my life really had been hijacked, and I did those things. And I had to own up to it. So what happened then? Talked to my wife, my parents, my lawyer, talked to my bishop, and they all told me the same thing. Dan, either you get sober and you make this thing work, or you're going to end up killing yourself or somebody else, and you're going to lose everything. So it was really the bottom that I needed, and you know, I don't know. The program has all sorts of cliches and things that they say on that, but it's really true. It was my bottom, and I said, I really got to make this work. So I went to Hazelden. I was there for 30 days, and I said, great, I got my 38 days done. Looked at my counselor, and he said, we want you to stay for 2 more months. So entered into the program that they have there that's extended care, which is the Jelinek unit. I was there for 2 more months. And I said, great, I've got 90 days done. Now I'm done. They said, no, now we want you to live in a sober house, in a sober living environment in St. Paul, Minnesota. I said, well, for how long? And all this time, I just kept thinking, you know, is my story going to be finished? What's going to happen to me? Because they still had this charges of trespassing in North Dakota. And they said, do whatever it takes, however long it takes. So to this day, what happened to me through the legal system, I want to thank you guys back there, anybody who was involved with this. You are part of my higher power, which gave me my new life. And I thank you so much. I really, really mean that. So many times we see cops as, look at the cops, he's give me a ticket on the highway and I was only going 10 miles an hour over. You know, it is sort of, oh, yeah, we got to have them, but they're the bad guys. You know what? You guys put your life on the line, and you put your life on your line for me to protect other people. And I'm super thankful. That's one of the amends that I made, is I thank the Sheriff's Department there. It was kind of nice that they said, Dan, this has been great, because this is the first time this has ever happened to us. Most addicts and alcoholics, they aren't too thankful for what the cops did for them. But I was very thankful. The charges that I had, I received probation. I was very lucky to get to be able to do an interstate transfer to Minnesota, because Minnesota hardly takes anybody, especially a felon. But they wanted to give me a chance, and I was just lucky. I lived in a sober house in St. Paul, Minnesota, in McAllister, Groveland, right across from the school where my kids now go to school. My wife stayed with me, and the only way that she could do that is through the program of Al-Anon, with herself working her own steps and saying, how does this thing work? Now, I'm not going to give you about all the stuff that happens in the program, because we've heard that before, but I will tell you this. The thing that really helped me was not only hitting my bottom, but realizing that I could find a purpose and meaning in life without a chemical boost. That my story, you know, this is what it's about, story. That my story could be really, really interesting without all that stuff. And I never realized that before. And, you know, like I said, I kind of enjoy being a pastor, but about after 5 years, I was like, come on, I want to do something else. And you know, do I really identify myself as that? And the answer was no. But I was given a second, third, and really a fourth chance. And I'm not going to blow it this time, and I work it very hard. While I was in the sober house, I said, well, what am I going to do? I'm not a pastor anymore. I have to find a way to make income and also find purpose and meaning, a way that I can give back. And I had an idea. See, my father had given me a gift when I was at Hazelden. It was the gift of a book. And I like to read, but this was a big, fat comic book. And I said, what the heck is this? It was called Logic Comics. And believe it or not, the topic of Logic Comics, it's a New York Times bestseller, is Bertrand Russell's attempt to prove the foundations of mathematics. I thought, oh my God, this is incredibly boring. But when I opened it up, here was this fabulous story about this guy, Bertrand Russell, who grew up at the turn of the century. And it illustrated in such a way that made all the philosophy and the stuff that happened at the time, his life, his love affairs that he had, it was really good. It was really exciting. And I had this idea when I was in the sober house, living in St. Paul, you know, why couldn't we have something like this for people who want to find recovery? I wonder if that exists. Clickety click, click, got on the internet? No, it doesn't. There's my idea. I'm going to make a graphic novel. And of course, my wife was just, yeah, all right, okay, fine. That's a great idea. I always have these great ideas, and she's tolerant of me. So I found an artist, and we put it together, and I gave it to Hazelden Publishing, and they said, yeah, okay, this is a good idea. We had like 10 pages, and they said, no, I don't think so. I said, no, this is really a good idea. So I did it again, and I came and proposed it again. And the second time, the acquisitions editor there, Sid Farrar, he looked at it and he said, yeah, I can kind of see this. This is really good. And it's good for everyone, of every generation. That's the most amazing thing about comics. Don't think that they're some newfangled thing that is like, oh, this stupid little comic book, because they've existed forever. On the walls of caves and also within pyramids, we have comics. That is, stories and text together. And as she mentioned, that's actually how the brain learns better. So they're even using comics within school. So I came a third time. This time I had produced about 20 pages. I gave it to Hazelden, and this is my last shot. If I couldn't do this, then I was going to have to go work at Starbucks. They looked at it and they said, this is amazing. We have to get this to people. It's awesome. And although anybody can read it, we're really going to gear this towards youth and young adults, because it makes the access of the story of the steps and how you learn recovery in a very easy format. It's simple without being simplistic. So we began to produce that, and last year, Hazelden Publishing, in November, they just published Sobriety, a graphic novel, which is this cool thing here. And I got to tell you, it's got, well, I wrote it, but it has a lot of fun stories in it too, and it really will allow you to understand what addiction is. And if you've ever wondered about the 12 steps, it will tell you what that is. I have a bunch of copies back there. I take credit cards. The second book that I produced was actually what I was originally contacted for here, because I had written an op-ed in Zambrota's paper. And this is the second one. This is a suburban boy's story as a victim of sex trafficking far away. And now, because I had two books that were traditionally published, which is very, very difficult, there are very few writers that do this as a profession, and that's what I do. It's great. I get to drink lattes and wear a little hat and talk to you guys. And I produce Sunday school materials for Augsburg Fortress for the Lutheran Church. I still do that. And I produce science books for K through third grade through Amicus Publishing, which is in Mankato. Life is very, very good. And all because I had all these bad things happen, and that my story was not yet finished. And this is what I try to tell, especially addicts, when they come to a point and they say, oh God, everything is awful. I've got two DUIs and I'm throwing up blood and my wife's going to leave me. It's okay. This is maybe what you need right now, because your story isn't finished. And you will get the promises, you will get the gifts, but only if you remain sober. And the way that you do that is by finding a community, reaching out to the people, and tell them that addiction does not have to control their lives. And it does work, but only if you work it. I'm very happy to be here today. Thanks for letting me talk to you.
I have a question for you. This is unusual for us,
What's that? Did I go over time?
that we didn't have don't have a question.
Oh, yeah, just shoot the questions. I love questions. They're fun.
It's like we're just kind of recovering ourselves
Yeah.
from your emotional.
Yes.
You had any experience with Minnesota Dalton Teen Challenge?
Yeah, I'm going to be speaking up in there in Brainerd, but we're setting a date a little bit.
You needed a longer term, like you said you were there a month, then you kept going for a number of months afterwards.
Right. Yeah.
It takes a lot longer to...
Yeah, it does. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that's one of the things that you can do for advocacy as citizens, is realize that sending somebody to treatment for, say, 2 weeks, and all of a sudden their insurance drops it and say, I'm sorry, we can't pay anymore. It does absolutely nothing. It's a waste to the insurance. It's a waste to our society. It's a waste to everything. Some people can get it in 30 days, and especially if they're highly motivated enough, but relapse, our statistics ain't good. For the first time that people go to treatment, the chances that you will relapse, especially if you're younger, are 95%. I mean, that's terrible. And that's, if you consider this like an illness, that's like pancreatic cancer. That's your, it's about a 5% survival rate.
The Minnesota Teen Challenge has a much higher recovery rate than...
Yeah, well, it does, and I know that Hazelden, when insurance can pay it, is the best. And here's one thing, just other thing I got to mention, just about Minnesota and St. Paul in general. Did you know that St. Paul, Minnesota, per capita, has more people living in recovery, more sober houses, more access to treatment centers, and through the, what's it called, Rule 52, or is it Rule? Rule 25, yeah, that's right. I mean, there are so many states that don't have this. If you are going to get sober in any state, Minnesota is the place to do it. And I will tell you, I mean, that's why I'm so just passionate, completely passionate about St. Paul, Minnesota. It's my email address. I love St. Paul. So, yes, you had something. Yes.
Okay. While you're going through treatment and all that, how did your family take it?
It's difficult to say. I think, I mean, it's a question that she would answer better. I think third time around, she just really didn't know what was going to happen, but neither did I. I don't know. It's just sort of scary. I will say that her impression of Hazelden was higher than any of the 2 programs that I had done before, mostly because their family program that they have, they don't pair you off with your person who is the addict. That is, for example, my wife doesn't sit in the same room with me. They sit, people that are families, they sit with other addicts and alcoholics. And because they don't know each other, they're much more open to talk and to communicate. Whereas if my wife was there, he said, "Yeah, you idiot, you know." But it really works.
But I would like to hear her story. Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah.
Just because it's a whole different.
Yeah, it's a different aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But can be just I can't say just. It would be very painful.
Oh, extremely painful. I mean, and that's the toughest thing too. Is now I see this on the other side. Is, you know, this is one illness that just doesn't affect me. It affects everybody else, and not just my family, the community too. Alcohol and drugs, they're always going to be there. So what we have to ask ourselves is, how is it that we have a relationship with them? Now, in some states, they have different laws towards each thing. Within Minnesota, with alcohol, I believe this being in the program, some people can drink, and they can drink normally, and they can have a beer. I can't. I go off the rails. And, you know, pretty soon I'm in Walmart buying cooking sherry, and it's crazy. I mean, it's just.
Ray, yeah.
How long were you in sober house then after them 90 days?
9 months.
9 months?
Yep. And what that means is they have requirements. Is the place where I was at was called Transitions, and you have to go to 4 meetings a week. You have to have a job, and you have to do your house duties and just live with other people. Actually, I thought it was really fun. I enjoy being there because all of a sudden I said, "Well, I'm not going to jail." Okay, cool. Life might happen, you know. So.
Yeah, what kind of relationship do you have with your family then while you were in all this?
Well, she lived in Williston at the time, and she was going to Al-Anon, my wife, and my kids. They're 5 years younger then. So my younger one, I think he knew that something was off, that I was sick and I needed to be away. And my older son, he's on the autism spectrum, so he was completely oblivious of it. He just, oh, okay, he's over there. So I think the way they answer that question is after 20 years of not having colon cancer, why did it come back?
Yeah, that's.
We don't know. I mean, it just does. I mean, I've got over 4 years. I'm working on my 5th year now, and I still, when I dream at night, have these dreams of pill bottles all over. Yep. Why do I do that? I mean, you know. But part of it is the other thing that we have to think about is the brain is an organ just like anything else is an organ. It's that it controls our behavior, that it makes us feel very uncomfortable talking about diseases that happen up here. It's an induced mental illness, is what it is. You know, I mean, if somebody has depression, we don't say to them, "Well, snap out of it. Come on. It's a beautiful day outside. Look, you're in Cannon Falls, Minnesota, and there's pheasants under your bed." You know, I mean, yeah, but they can't snap out of it because there's something that isn't working correctly. So then they go to the doctor and they get SSRIs and they have therapy and treatment, and then it's okay. Well, you know, addiction is no different than that. It's just it has a different way of expressing itself, and it has another component.
Isn't Minnesota, though, a real leader because of Hazelden?
Oh, yeah. Like I said, statistically, per capita, St. Paul has more people than anybody in the world. Yeah. And now it's Hazelden Betty Ford, by the way. So they're even bigger. They're the world's largest. A behemoth. Good stuff.
You know, working the street, you know, it's a lot of people say cops get cynical, you know, and we tend to see the dark side of life sometimes. And, you know, your story is fun to hear because we tend to see people at their worst. We hook them, we haul them to jail, we haul them up to detox. You know, they get cocky with us, they want to fight or whatever. So whenever we get these positive stories, they're really fun to hear, and it's really good.
Thank you.
So,
I'm just going to add to that is on the same pace here is people think, yep, we take people to jail. And that's the only thing we do. And we do this job for a reason because we care about people and we serve people. And these are the people that we work for.
Yeah, and I will say you need to protect society too, because, I mean, when I was drinking, especially with benzos, I was a different person. I mean, I lost all my morality. It's just, you know, it's rough stuff. Yeah.
in the last week, two former meth users that I've dealt with in the past. One of them relapsed. He's in the hospital now. Potential overdose. Hopefully he makes it through.
Yeah.
He's got a beautiful baby. He's just not ready to wake up and smell
That's
coffee,
right.
I guess.
That's right, yeah.
And then his cousin, actually, I met her baby yesterday. She's been clean 3 years now. And she's got a 9-month-old. So he drooled all over my uniform.
Yeah.
So it was pretty cool.
And you know, one dynamic that makes it a little different right now, it's sort of surprising too, is the resurgence of heroin. And when you're dealing with heroin, you're dealing with a different creature because I never took heroin, but I took painkillers that were pretty similar to it. The withdrawal is pretty uncomfortable and it's really unfun, and you'll do anything to make it stop. You won't use it so you can feel high again, because that really doesn't happen. The first capture that you have, you don't really get that anymore. You just want to make the pain stop. And you know, the other thing is you don't know what's in it. I mean, heroin, they cut it with fentanyl and all sorts of and Benadryl and all sorts of weird stuff. So that's why you get overdoses, because people they don't know what's in it. You know, have you seen heroin down here? Yes. Yeah, it's huge in Minneapolis, St. Paul. I can't. It makes me shake my head.
Lauren?
I guess I'm next. You feature 5 characters in your graphic novel.
Yeah.
I'm looking at their pictures and their names. Do you see yourself as any one of those characters or a composite of all those characters?
Oh, that's a neat question. I've never had anybody ask that before. Probably a composite. It was very important. One of the things I had to fight for with the publisher is the character of Larry, who, yeah, he's up in the left-hand corner here. He's the old-timer in recovery circles, and actually his story, I take the longest to tell it. It's over 50 pages of the book. It was very important for me to do that because, especially for a lot of youth and young adults that get into the rooms, that is, into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, they meet people of different generations. And that's why I'm so hopeful seeing something like this, although you are kind of divided by sides here. Well, Republicans, Democrat, or anything like that. But yeah, but here's the thing, and this kind of cooks your noodle a little bit. It doesn't matter what age you are. It doesn't matter what race you are. It doesn't matter what your sexual orientation is. It doesn't matter what job you have or your gender. It does not matter. A human being is a human being, and the human condition is precisely the same. So that's why we wanted to add that character in there.
Yeah, where'd you get your money from?
Oh, as far as, where did...
For drugs?
Well, I didn't buy off the street.
Oh.
I never bought off the street. It was always through doctors.
Now
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah, and I didn't use marijuana because I didn't really like it. You know, it just made me feel paranoid, and there was one time after I went to the first treatment, I decided, I know what my problem is. I'm ADHD,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna go to a psychiatrist, an MD, and I'm gonna talk to him. And I knew everything. I'm smart, so I read a lot, and luckily, sure enough, you have ADHD. Here's some amphetamines. I mean, so, you know, part of it is doctors, they don't realize what depths we'll go to and how clever we can be. And this is why I say you got to get people who are addicts and alcoholics, you got to get them sober because they can be society's most productive members. You know, me without alcohol and drugs, you know, the sky's the limit. I got a new fiction book out next, so.
I have to ask before we lose you here, the elephant in the room, as far as I can see, is medical marijuana.
Yeah.
What's your position on medical marijuana?
I have no position on it. And we don't know enough yet to say either medical or recreational. It's kind of an experiment what's happening in Colorado and Washington at this point.
Would you say it's a gateway drug?
If you're an addict, anything can be a gateway drug. My gateway drug was alcohol. You know, with others, it's pornography. I mean, you see that's ubiquitous all over the place. Is it a bad thing? Should we not have it in the United States? Well, no. We live in a country where we have freedom. You know, and I'm kind of a libertarian when it comes to a lot of this stuff. You know, and I also believe in harm reduction. What that is, though, we've decided, like harm reduction with heroin, has for the longest time it's been methadone. Okay, and what methadone users find is it puts them under more slavery than they had before with heroin. Methadone was made by the Nazis, by the way. Did you know that? No. Yeah, the Nazis made methadone because they weren't going to get opioid poppies anymore, and they needed something to give as a painkiller. So they said, oh, okay, we'll give this thing here. And it lasts forever. It does pretty good as a pain control drug, but the withdrawal lasts 9 months, and it keeps going on forever. So I don't know. You know, what is
a pretty good answer, I have to say.
Yeah. As far as marijuana, I don't know. We'll see. It's an experiment. You guys are leaving. You got to go. By the way, I love your shirt. On the back of it, it said, what does it say? Hit it hard. That's my mantra for life. Don't just tap it, hit it hard. Thanks, guys, for coming.
They have a class scheduled.
Yeah, no problem. Hey, tell your buddies you can get on the internet. Okay. Got to sell books.
You know, he'll be around for a bit, and then if anybody wants to go out, okay.
I'll say it for you.
Yes.
Thank
Thank you.